We cooking? Yep. Okay, so let's go through the exam. I have a blank one here. There we go. All right. Oh, that's a weird. Oh, wrong button. There we go. Okay, number one, write an error-free Hello World program. Emphasis on program, not method. So you need to have the whole public class, whatever. So public class, you can call it driver, public, static, void, main, string, array, whatever. So something pretty close to that. I tried to give a little bit of partial credit if what you gave me was in the ballpark of like, you know what you're doing and it was test anxiety or just rushing. But some of you wrote just, I mean, you basically could have just thrown up on the paper and it would have been a pretty equivalent answer. So just saying. Questions on that one? Hopefully not. Bakari, you good with that one? Got it? High efficiency or just the regular old washing machine? It broke? Oh, so you're doing this stuff by hand. Oh. You know what's like? You know what's a really good way to? You just wash it with dish soap in the sink, and then you kind of dry it on your George Foreman. Did that with a baseball cap one time. It does not work. No. Because the cap had like the holes back here. Those melt. Yeah, it ruined a George Foreman. Let's see. Difference between public and private, and when would you use each? So these typically relate to fields, to variables, but they can relate to methods as well. They could also relate to classes technically. But public means that the member, the class member, is accessible anywhere within the directory structure, within the package. You can kind of explain it different ways, but you could just say it's accessible everywhere or anywhere. Private means that that class member that you've made private is only accessible within that particular class. Okay? And then when would you use each? So private is really kind of your go-to move. You want to make things as private as possible and then, you know, loosen the reins if you have to. So, but if you had to give some explanation for this, private is when you only need access to the variable or the method, you know, to the class member within that class, and want to provide specific types of access outside of the class, either read-only or write-only, that kind of stuff through accessors or mutators or getters and setters. Public is when you want it available everywhere. So typically methods, it would make sense to make them public if things outside of the class need to have access to them. But almost always you want to have your fields private. Okay, almost always you want to have your fields private. And then if you need to have some level of access to them, you write a getter and setter or getter or setter and provide some access to those guys. Questions about that one? If you have any questions about how I graded your specific exam, you can come up after class and I'll tell you why I took off whatever. Okay, number 3. This one was missed a lot, and we definitely talked about it. So explain why the char primitive type is actually stored as an unsigned 16-bit integer. Okay, well, first reason is computers like numbers, not characters, right? Okay, so we store everything as a number. The character set, the char primitive type, is stored as a Unicode value. Okay, so we have this thing called Unicode, which is a lookup table. So in a char primitive type, we store a number that translates into a character on that Unicode table. And that Unicode table has 65,535 unique characters on it, or 65,536 unique characters on it. So we need a 16-bit unsigned number in order to reference that. We don't need negative numbers because the first character in the Unicode set is at bucket 0. Okay? But we need the full space of 16 bits to get us up to 65,535. So we can reference 0 to 65,535 in the buckets of that array, if you will, for the Unicode character set. Make sense? All right, we got a lot of answers like characters don't need negative numbers and stuff like that. But so I really was looking for that connection between the char primitive type and the Unicode character set. If you said ASCII, I pretty much let that fly, but ASCII is really only the first 256 characters. But you know, something along the lines of it being related to a character set and there being a mapping. All right, questions on that one? All right, let's see. 4, write the necessary code to define an integer array capable of holding 25 integers. Something like that. You name your array whatever you want. But that will define a variable named AR of type integer array capable of holding 25 integers. Okay, next one was the one that everybody, well, I think like 1.5 people got points on it, which, I don't know, I thought was weird, but my wife read it, she thought it was confusing, so I just curved it back in. So number 5, write the necessary code to fill an integer array named AR with the value 5. So I guess I was thinking, you know, you have an integer array named AR, and it has how many elements are in the integer array named AR? Wrong answer. Also the wrong answer. More reasonable answer than doesn't say. How many buckets are there in an integer array named AR?
AR.length.
AR.length number of buckets, right? Okay, so I wanted you to go through all the buckets in AR and put a 5 in every bucket. Fill it. Where was it confusing? It was obviously confusing because like everybody missed it.
I took it as like fill one bucket with 5. I thought you just wanted us to show that we had this.
Oh, that you knew how to fill a bucket? Okay, I get it. All right, so this is kind of what I was looking for that guy. Let me left justify this. But I was also trying to test, did you know how to get the length of an array where I didn't tell you what the length is? And it seems like people sucked at that too. So did we learn a little something about that process? I asked that lots of times, right? How many elements are in this whatever? You know, so either s.length for this a string or the array. Killing me, people. So it might be something like for int I is equal to 0, I is less than AR.length. I++, and notice that this length is a field, not a method like it would be for strings. Strings have the opening and closing parentheses. I didn't take off for that anywhere in the exam, but just for your own knowledge. And then AR at bucket I is equal to 5. So that's what I was looking for that one, but it doesn't matter. You could have just written a smiley face on that one. You got the points. And if you earned points on that one anyways, you got the extra points. I just added 10 to everybody's exam. So the high grade was above 100, I believe. The low grade was, I want to say like a 13 or something like that. Yeah, it was really crap. So, yeah, those, if you got a 13, you want to work on this before the final. Let's see. I think the class average after the 10 points was in like a 79, an 80, something like that. So I think the exam was about where it needed to be in terms of class average. So if you're significantly below a, let's say a 70 after the curve, you got some groundwork to make up. All right. Number 6, define a class named car that stores the number of wheels, the number of maximum passengers, and the color. Then write an appropriate constructor for this class. Oh, great. It's him. Oh, I got to run to my office and get his exam. He must have mixed in with the 325s. And no coffee. Yeah. Oh, did I give you his exam? Oh, thank you. You didn't look at the number, did you? I knew it was in the pile because you were the dividing. He's in both classes, and I remember the last 250 exam was his. Okay, and you can add, Van, you can add 10 points to that. So number 5 was a confusing question apparently, so I just gave it back to everybody. Yeah.
Well, a better question now that I understand it, because I was like, when I was doing what I wrote, I was like, that's easy.
Oh, because I always ask before my exams. I always say, if you're not sure what I'm asking, come up and ask. Don't guess.
Yeah.
And nobody came up and asked, so I figured it must have been clear. So the point is, it was clear. You just assumed it was like a really easy question. I get it. But everybody's happy with me just giving you 10 points for it? That's reasonable? All right. It was against my better judgment. My wife said it was a confusing question. And she is a programmer, so it wasn't like she's just, like, oh, I don't know what that's asking. Well, you don't know what any of them are asking. What question am I on? 6. Oh, class name car. Let's start a new slide here. All right, so we're going to create a class named car. So we're creating a car object, and this guy's going to have 3 fields in it. We have a field for number of wheels, number of maximum passengers, and a color. So wheels and passengers is probably going to be a number. Color is probably going to be a string. So we're going to say int, and if you really wanted to be fancy about this, you probably would have said private int num wheels, but I didn't take off if you didn't put private in there. Then private int max passengers, and then private string color. Okay, then you're going to write a constructor for this guy. So these are the fields waiting to get values. Then you're going to write a constructor. Constructors always have the same name as the class. And this guy's going to take in an int num wheels, int max passengers, string color, this dot num wheels is equal to num wheels. This dot max passengers is equal to max passengers. This dot color is equal to color. So something like that. So we're writing a blueprint for an object. This object keeps track of 3 pieces of information: the number of wheels a car has, the maximum number of passengers a car can carry, and the color of the car. And we have the intention that we might make multiple instances of cars, right? So we might create one car that has 4 wheels, 5 passengers, and it's pink. We might create another car, we'll use this loosely, that has 2 wheels, it's a motorcycle, 2 passengers, and maybe the color is black, something like that. Okay. Then you could use a dump truck or something like that, where it has, how many wheels do those have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes like 6 wheels, right? So number of wheels is 6, max passengers is usually like 2 or 3, because it's all wheels, right? It's all wheels, and then that crushing mechanism in the back. You don't want to ride back there. That reminded me of a really horrific story, actually. And nobody was hurt at the end of this one. So as I'm prefacing that. So years and years and years ago, I worked at an Office Depot as like a stock boy. And you know how the back of these places, they usually have like some sort of like a thing for like crushing boxes, like a big chute you throw trash. It's like an industrial trash compactor, right? Well, we had somebody, I don't even remember how they got down. They fell in there somehow, but I mean, I think it was like a fight and somebody shoved them down there. They shut the door and pushed the button. So like in all of our minds, this person is being crushed alive, right? You know, like Star Wars. Apparently it didn't even get close to them, but that the whole don't ride the back of the dump truck reminded me of that. But I wouldn't take any chances. I wouldn't throw anybody down an industrial trash compactor and push buttons. It's bad. Could you even imagine? We're sitting there like horrified because it's like a 45-second process. And the thing's locked. While it's, I mean, we're basically sitting there wondering if our coworker is being killed.
What was his explanation after? Like, did he know that it wasn't going to do anything?
I don't remember. Yeah. I think everybody was kind of more relieved that maybe it didn't come up then. It might have come up in like a meeting with a manager later or something, something like that. Yeah. The answer is probably yes, but nobody pushed it. I mean, we were all kind of like flipping out, if I remember correctly. Huh? Yeah, I'm not recalling the whole thing that great, but yeah, I think they were like fighting. No, I know, and I have no idea how it all played out in the end, you know, because it was like my first job, you know, so I was, yeah, I don't even remember kind of how it went down. I mean, I don't think like police were called right then, but it's possible that, you know, I mean, I know managers came in and people were being screamed at and stuff probably happened afterwards. And I don't think either of them worked there after that. But, you know, so fine, they were fired. That's not really who knows. Yeah, so don't ride in the back of a dump truck because when they push buttons, bad things might happen. Maybe not, but might. All right, so I think that's a Christian worldview. All right, questions about this car object, constructor dealy? Understand the kind of the purpose of that guy? 7, right? I'm on 7. Write a simple program that illustrates two variables with the same name that are distinct because they are in separate scopes. Okay. This was a scope question. So you could have done something like public, class, driver, public, static, void, main, string array args. Could have done something like that where you just had one method with two different for loops in it. So I exists in two separate scopes here. Same name, but two separate scopes. All right, so this I is distinct from this I, but they do live in the same program. All right, so we have one scope that lives and dies with its first for loop, another scope that lives and dies with a second for loop. So that's one approach you could have taken. Another approach something like that, where you have two separate methods. Each of those methods has a variable named A in it. Doesn't matter what you do with it. They have the same name, but they are distinct from each other because this guy is local to the scope for method 2. This guy is local to the scope for main. Some people also did global variables. That works as well. So, questions about that one? So, show me that you understand the difference between various scopes and how we can have have two variables with the same name, but if they live in different scopes, those guys don't conflict with each other. But they also don't have anything to do with each other. All right. That was 7. All right, 8. 8 was missed a lot too. And I told you there'd be conversion questions, right? 1B, B9C. All right. And you're supposed to do this to what? Binary? All right, so the binary of this is actually easy, and we did this in class. So each of these digits, it's not a digit technically, it's a hexet. Didn't we look it up? I think it's a hexet. Each hexet has it requires 4 bits, 0 to 15, right? So this is 0001 because that's the binary number for 1. A B is an 11, right? So that's 1 in the 8's place, 0 in the 4's place, 1 in the 2's place, 1 in the 1's place. A 9 would be 1 in the 8's place, 0, 0, 1. And then a C is a 12, right? That's 1 in the 8's place, 1 in the 4's place, 0, 0. Just squish all these together. There's your binary of that guy. So that would be the short way of doing it. All right, so that made the question super easy if you did it that way. If you wanted to go about it the longer way, which some of you did, then what would you have done? You would have first probably converted this number to decimal. All right, so this is the ones place. So if we'll go ahead and do that, I guess. It's gonna suck, but so we have in this case that's a 12, so we have 12 times 1 plus 9 times 16 plus 11 times 256 plus 1 times 4096. So that's 12 plus 151 plus 2560. I could probably do it in my head. Times, what was it? 11? 11 times 256. 2761. Right? Huh? Oh, I screwed it up. Oh, thank you. 2816. Plus 4096. Add all those guys together. We get 7075. So that's our decimal number. Did I screw up 9 times? Are you sure? 160 minus 9, no. 44. Why am I doing that wrong?
Minus 9, that's really minus 16.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Always use a calculator, right? Okay. Or do it the easy way. All right, so 7068. Does that one sound right? All right, so that's our decimal number of it. So now we need to convert that guy to binary. So we divide it by 2 over and over and over again. So 7068 divided by 2 is going to give us a, well, here, 7068 divided by 2 is 3534. 3534, and that's going to have a remainder of 0. What's left justify this guy? 3534 divided by 2 is 1767. 1767, also a remainder of 0. 1767 divided by 2 is 883, remainder 1. 883 divided by 2 is 441, remainder 1. 441 divided by 2 is 220, remainder 1. 220 divided by 2, that one's 110, right? All right, got that one right. Apparently I need to check with the audience. Remainder 0, 110 divided by 2 is 55. 2 in a row, nailed it. Remainder 0, 55 divided by 2 is 22. No, 27, yeah, I would have got that one right. I rushed to my answer. Divided by 2, 27, that's 54, so remainder 1. Sucks getting old. Okay, 27 divided by 2 is 13, remainder 1. Oop. 13 divided by 2 is 6, remainder 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3, remainder 0. 3 divided by 2 is 1, remainder 1. 1 divided by 2 is 0, remainder 1. All right, then we read our answer from bottom to top. So that's 1 1 0 1 1 1 0 0 1 1 1 0 0. 1 1 0 1 1 1 0 0 1 1 1 0 0. Make sense? I'll shrink this down a little bit so you can. So there's the math for doing it the long way. What's up?
No, I just, for the first 3, the 110, I switched it and put the 1 for the remainder.
Where? Down here?
Yeah, that's what I have, but I don't have like the one that's at the top.
You don't have this guy?
No, like one more up. That.
Well, this is the final answer.
Right.
That guy matches this guy. We just got to it 2 different ways. We got to this guy here by getting the 4-bit version of 1, right, the 4-bit version of B, the 4-bit version of 9, and the 4-bit version of C.
Right.
So that's the answer. If you were to do it the, hey, I know what I'm doing way. If you did it the, hey, I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing, but hey, I'll do the conversion crap, you would do your answer this way.
That's not right, though.
Yeah, both of these are correct ways. So if I took off, so if you're showing the work and I didn't follow your work and I took off more points you think you deserve, just come up after class and I'll look at it. Is that what you're thinking? That I screwed you over? Okay, that's fine. So we'll look at it. Hey, I couldn't do some of these divisions in my head. Chances are I was playing video games. I was watching Netflix while I was grading this stuff. Who knows what was going on in the show? I mean, we don't know.
What were you watching?
House of Cards.
Told to watch
Huh?
Been told to watch
Yeah, it's pretty good. You got to binge it, I think, though.
it. Yeah.
And it's one of those shows where my policy is I'll only watch, if I know this is kind of the last episode I'm going to watch, I'll only watch it to about the halfway point. Because you let it go all the way to the end, then you got to watch the next one to find out what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like otherwise you're just up for hours.
A couple weeks it could be a binge week because a week break from football and track. So that week is just so much free.
Got it. Yeah, I think the show's pretty good. Kind of makes you concerned whether politics actually works that way. It's like one of those things where you believe it probably does, and that also scares the hell out of you.
Did you watch the last Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Why do you think they fed walkers to pigs?
Well, I think it's to feed the pigs.
Yeah, but there's like a meaning behind it.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Like there's a motive because they sold them.
Yeah, right. Well, they didn't sell them. That was,
Or they gave it.
yeah, it was them working for Negan. Yeah, that's them giving their thing to them so they don't get killed. That's a good point. I don't know. I didn't really think that there was like a deeper meaning. Like, hey, you need something to feed to the pigs, and well, I mean, humans aren't going to eat the walkers, so let the pigs eat it because the pigs will eat their own crap, right?
I thought they were feeding them because then like people would be kind of Negan's place and they'd turn.
Oh, maybe. You might be onto something there. I don't think that's the way it works, though, but like nowhere in the show have they talked about like eating a walker makes you turn. But I mean, it makes some sense. Yeah, I don't know. Walkers are zombies if you don't watch the show.
Well, that one guy, when he lost his leg, the cannibal people were eating him,
Yeah,
and they turned.
not from that.
They were scared of it though, because he was bit, and then they were eating his leg, and then they didn't realize he was turning.
Oh, but did they turn because of that, or did they get bit?
I think they turned because of that.
Oh.
Remember they're talking about how like if it's the fluids like from the zombies, and like even like if it's in the water supply, like it will turn you.
Oh, there might be a connection there. That's interesting. Yeah, see, I missed that.
I wonder how walkers would do it cold.
How they would do in the cold?
Yeah, like if you just moved like kept going north, like do you think places like I mean I guess since they're already zombies at this point.
Well, now we're over to Game of Thrones now. I mean, there you got. I mean, they're kind of like the zombie people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're fine in the cold, it seems. In fact, they seem. Yeah.
I mean, isn't it located near the? I mean, it's by Atlanta, but it's north of Atlanta. Like,
Oh, where Game of Thrones records?
oh, it's like
Oh. Oh! I understand what you're saying. Where the show is taking place, not where it's being recorded, but yeah, it's supposed to be north of Atlanta. I think you're right. So they got to go farther north to get to a rougher climate. That's what you're saying.
Like the zombies progress, like every season they get more indicated. It's like, you know, like time goes on, the zombies get more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If it keeps going on, there's gonna be a skeleton walking around.
It's gonna be awesome. So Mr. Gonzalez had two favorite parts of that show. He watches the show with us. True story. He also has an impression of a zombie that he does, but he liked the tiger, and he liked the part at the very beginning where they were running by on horseback and like sliced the zombie's face like like kind of like a salami slice, right? Yeah, I like that part too. I really like the tiger. All right, back to conversion. Questions on this one? Does that make sense? Now, interestingly enough, what if I had said to take this number and convert it to octal? Okay, so let me show you the quick trick for that. You would take it to binary first. And then octal, no, threes. Octal requires 0 to 7 is the range of values for octal. So that's 4 plus 2 plus 1. So you need 3 bits. So this would be the octal number 0, 6, 7, 1, 4. Make sense? So octal and hex are easily convertible with binary using either octal's 3 bits, binary's 4 bits. All right, nice little. It's not really even a shortcut. It's more evidence why computers use those bases. All right, so interesting extra thing there. Number 9, write a method named count spaces that takes a string as a parameter and returns the number of spaces contained within the string. Now, something I'll say about this one is typically the programming questions are where people really get screwed over on the exams. In general, class did pretty well on this programming question, so I was impressed. I was completely unimpressed with some of the other crap you missed, but the programming one was fairly legit. What's it called? Count spaces, takes a string, returns the number of spaces. Okay, so this guy's going to return an int called count spaces. It's going to take in a string as a parameter. We need to spin through every character in that string, counting the number of spaces we run into. So we have our for loop. How many characters are in S? S dot length, number of characters. All right. So S dot length, and this guy is a method. Again, I didn't take off for that, but understand that strings have a length method. So you have the opening, closing parentheses. Arrays have a length field. So you're just calling upon that variable. It's not a method. I plus plus. Then we're going to ask, is the current character we're looking at if s dot char at I, if that guy is equivalent to 2 equal signs. I think a lot of people used 1 equal sign. I didn't take off for it, but 2 equal signs is our equivalence operator to the char space. That is a space in there, but here I'll make it a little wider for the purpose of the audience. Okay, if that guy is equal to the char space, not the string space, because this guy here boils down to a char. So I'm saying, does this char match this char? See what just happened there? I flipped to the other application because I hit the what was this, the trackpad. It's called something else for the Mac though, isn't it? It's the multi-touch something or other. But the new Macs have the trackpad's like supposed to be the size of a football or something. I mean, I'm gonna be screwed with that thing. I'm gonna be hitting it all over the place. So that's a bad design because they think they want me to write my name with my finger or something like that.
Are you gonna order it right away?
Huh?
Are you gonna order
It's already ordered. I already have it ordered. Yeah, I mean, this one's a 2012.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm giving up really is my stickers. I'm gonna miss these stickers. I'm getting too old for the hackathons now. I can't stay up for 24 hours anymore. Barely stay up for 12.
Send students to get stickers for you.
I do. It's bad. Like when we went to Raleigh last year. Actually, Raleigh. I went. Raleigh. For some reason I was just up. I wrote a whole programming language at Raleigh. That was a good one for me. But in New York, I slept like most of it. It's bad. I mean, it sucks getting old. I used to pull all-nighters like it was no big deal. Now it's like 1 a.m. Your ears are ringing. All right, so if I found a space, then we're going to say count plus plus. Squeeze this down here. After the for loop, after After the for loop, I've gone through every character in the string. I've looked at each one, found all the ones that were spaces, added one to count. I'm then going to return the number of spaces I found. Make sense? All right, so in general, this one wasn't too bad. A lot of people tried to do like char@, compared to like the string space. That won't fly, but I kind of got what you were going with your logic. So I didn't really take off for that. Yeah, so in general, they weren't bad. I mean, some of them were horrible. I don't want to let you all off the hook. But in general, I would say that 80% of the class typically would have lost a good chunk of points on this. And I would say that maybe only 20% of the class lost a good chunk of points on it. Most people did pretty well on it, at least showed some level of competence. All right, questions about that one? Decent sense? All right, number 9. Oh no, 10. We're on 10. This one made me angry. Now, if you were to round up to the nearest 1,000, round down to the nearest 1,000, how many times did we cover class method versus instance method, static versus not? I mean, like a lot, right? Like multiple times per class, right? Tons of people miss this. If there's one thing to memorize, it's that. Kind of like when you go to the CS get-together, you got to memorize the university mission statement. You just know that's going to get you a prize. And it usually comes up pretty early. You memorize it, right? I'm out of coffee. Van, you see what happens? I'm out of coffee. Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, you show up late, empty-handed. You doing Bible study today?
Yeah.
All right. What was I talking about? Oh, number 10. All right. Let's write this down. Class method versus instance method. All right. So at definition versus usage, we can tell the difference between a class method being defined and an instance method being defined. Class methods have the static keyword in front. Instance methods do not have the static keyword in front. That is how we can tell the difference between them when they're being defined. When they're being used, class methods are called by the name of the class in which the method was defined. Instance methods are called using an instance of the class in which the method was defined. If you wanted to kind of show an example, you'd say something like driver dot count numbers, something like that. That's assuming we had a method called count numbers that was defined as a static method inside of a class called driver. We would call it driver dot count numbers because it was static. It's a class method. We call it using the name of the class. An instance method, for instance, the char@ method from the string class, is a non-static method. So we call it s.char@, using an instance of the string class to call that guy. Make sense? And the real disappointing thing with that was there was a good chunk of people that were completely clueless on the whole concept. And that's just embarrassing. Then you had the ones that just flipped it, which is garbage, but at least you kind of knew that those two worlds existed. You just had them. So, yeah, I guess, whatever. All right, questions about the exam. That should be the whole thing, right? All right, like I said, if you have more questions after class today, come up and ask, and I'll tell you why I took off points, or I'll give you points back, or I'll take more points off. I won't take more points off. All right, so let's keep trucking. All right, so we've been rating class stuff, right? Yeah, see, I just woke up not that long ago, and I'm already tired. I'm like ready for a nap. I gotta go. I gotta teach till 10 o'clock tonight. Yeah, I know it sucks. 4-hour classes. Ay. All right. Oh, so we were converting our old soccer dealy flippy into objects, right? Did we finish that? Doesn't look like we did. We finish it?
Well, we had it as an assignment. So I
We
think
were just going through the assignment.
Right. I know we were, but did I finish writing it? Well, let's just walk through it and find out. All right. So what we did is, in the the original assignment, we implemented our players as two parallel arrays, right? Where bucket 0 of the first array was the jersey number, bucket 0 of the second array was that player's rating, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to take those two values and we're going to pull them into a single object called player. Okay, and that object is going to store those two pieces of information, jersey number and rating. So this question, that part right there is pretty similar to what we were dealing with on that car question on the exam. All right, write a class, has 2 or 3 fields, write a constructor that matches the fields. Okay. Oh, something else that just reminded me for the last question. A lot of people wrote, well, not a lot. At least 2 or 3 people were writing something about the method has the same name as the class. That's the constructor. That's this guy. That has nothing to do with static versus non-static methods. So constructors always match the class name. Go ahead.
With using the objects like this versus the parallel arrays, like at what point now, after learning this, is parallel arrays better than? It just seemed like this would be a better way to do everything.
It's mostly true. Let's take it to one level up. Let's say you had parallel arrays of objects. So maybe you had, I'm trying to come up with a reasonable scenario. Well, okay. So let me answer. Let me do it this way. Realistically speaking, your way of thinking is probably correct. It's from a correct programming perspective. It probably almost always will be better to write it in objects. Sometimes you're going to be wanting to put something together kind of quick and dirty, and if you only have 2 values that you need to, well, I think this might be a pretty reasonable answer. If you only have 2 values that you need to associate with each other, and you don't need to do anything else with them, sure, you can throw them into a class and just have those 2 values and be done with it, or you can just throw them into 2 arrays and move on with life. So it's kind of a quick and dirty way of doing something that doesn't require the flexibility of an object. So maybe you can make the argument that if you only have 2 pieces of information that you need to relate to each other, maybe it's a tie. If you don't need to do methods and stuff like that related to it, it's like, well, I could do the object or I could just do the arrays. But the second you start getting into 3 or 4 or 5 things that need to relate to each other, then it's gonna become disorganized pretty quickly. But also understand that parallel arrays isn't necessarily something that's built into the language. Arrays are built into the language. We just happen to use that tool to solve, a problem that, before we knew something else. So it's kind of like using a screwdriver to pry something off of something else where it wasn't really what it was designed for, but it works, right? Or you try to do that and then the screwdriver slips. It goes right into You would think the flat head would be worse, but it's not. Because the Phillips head penetrates. This is why my wife makes me hire like electricians and stuff. Because I seem smart on the surface, but it's really only with this stuff. Everything else, it's a lost cause. All right, so we made our player class. Our player class keeps track of 2 fields. Both of these fields, notice I've made private. So if I want to get access to these fields, I have to give myself getters and setters. Okay, and my constructor is going to go ahead and take in those 2 values and set the corresponding fields for this particular instance of player. All right, so that's what this guy does. So this is our organizational tool. Go back to driver. Notice now we have, we used to have 2 arrays of players, and I think we started looking at array lists here as well. So in the initial assignment, they said, oh, just read in 5 players. So one of the weaknesses of arrays, if you want to call it that, is that they have a fixed size. So if you're reading in the roster for a team, you have to come up with the maximum size that a team might be if you're going to use arrays. Or you have to keep rebuilding new arrays every single time you have a team that's 1 slot bigger than you're capable of holding. Where array lists don't have that limitation. Array lists are arbitrary in size, so we create an array list capable of holding a player object, and then we start filling it with player objects. All right, so I think that, I'm guessing that's kind of where we left off, but let's just walk through this guy and see what he currently does. All right, so we moved our player array. I think we were probably talking about scope here. So for the time being, let's forget about these 2 lines. And let's see what we're doing below here. So all programs begin and end with main. So we're defining an array of players here capable of holding 5 players. We're calling our getPlayers method. Now, by the way I'm calling it here, is getPlayers a class method or an instance method? What do we expect to see when we find getPlayers? Go ahead.
It's called using class names as a class.
It's a class method. So what would we expect to see down there on the method definition? Static. It's a class method. Class methods have static in front of them. We're seeing this guy being called as a class method because we're calling it using the name of the class. Therefore, this is either bad code or this guy must be a class method. How many parameters does this method take? Go ahead.
1
1. What kind of parameter?
player array.
An array of player objects. Yep. So this guy takes in 1 parameter, and we expect that parameter to be an array of player objects. What do we expect the name of that parameter to be in the method? Trick question. Based on what you see here, what do we expect the name of the parameter to be in our static method definition at the bottom? Players? Nope. This is where his answer comes in. We don't know. We don't know by what we see here. We are passing in a variable named players. But all we know is that this method expects a variable expects a variable of type player array. We have no way of knowing what that, based on what I'm showing you right here, we have no way of knowing what variable name it will refer to that player array as. So when I scroll down to get players, here's get players. It does happen to use the same name players, okay? But it could have easily used a variable named LOL or something like that. But if I change it to LOL there, then I have to change it to LOL down in here where I'm actually doing the logic. Okay, so get players is going to take in a player array. We're going to have two pieces of information we're going to read in. Here's our input dealie. We're going to go through every element in our player array. And the number of elements that are in our players array is players.length. Notice this does not have parentheses after it, so it's a length field. We'll prompt for the two pieces of information, reading in jersey number, reading in player rating, and then we'll set players at bucket I equal to, we're going to create a new instance of our player class. Who is this guy right here? What am I calling upon there? The constructor. That's the constructor that we will find in the player class. I am passing this guy two parameters. What kind of parameters do we expect to find? If I flip over to the player class, what types of parameters does the player constructor take? Well, what kind of value is this guy? Go ahead. He's an int. What kind of value is this guy? Int. So we expect this constructor to take in two integers. We don't know what it's going to locally call those two integers. He just expects us to pass him two integers. I come over here to player. There's the constructor. Two integers. Make sense? All right. So this guy's going to go through and it's going to read in from the user our player information and create new instances of the player class and load it into our players array. Now, how come I am not returning the players array here? Why am I not actually returning the players array? This guy took in an array of players as a parameter. I went through and I filled up that array of players, but I never actually returned it. This guy returns void. Did I just waste my time? I'll give you the first part of the answer. The answer is no, I didn't waste my time. So now somebody else tell me why. Why did I not have to return the player array? It's a good thing I didn't ask some of these questions on the test. Oh, I'm using it all over the place, aren't I? This guy took in a players array. I'm using it in here, and I'm using it in a lot of places. But I'm never actually returning it here. Go ahead. Okay, well, the answer is yes. Why? Why am I changing the value of the original? Okay, so he's got the right answer with the wrong, well, with not the wrong Y, without a Y yet. Okay, I'm passing in a player array, and he's saying that the changes I make to that player array have a global impact. So I'm changing the values of the original. Okay, back.
You want to store it and then call it in a different method?
Well, I mean, that's a true statement, but why don't I have to return it here?
Because you're not using it there,
Well, I'm using it right here. So somebody hands me this basket, and I put a bunch of crap into this basket, and then I just die. Well, I'm morbid, right? Okay. I never actually hand the basket back. Yet I'm telling you this works. This is correct. Why is that? Go ahead.
Arrays are passed by address, not value.
Yeah, arrays are passed by address. So we are getting a pointer to where the actual array lives in global memory. Okay, so that's why, as Gabriel pointed out, we're making changes to the real array. Okay, not to some local copy. That make sense? So this array right here, players, when it's passed in, we get the address of where the array that was passed in lives, not some local copy of it. So any changes we make to it in here are globally felt. Therefore, or we said it has side effect. Therefore, we don't have to return it because we've already made the change in the real place. All right. So up here, when we call get players, passing in our players array, after this line of code completes, we know that players has now been filled up, right? The real players, this guy. Okay, this guy's been filled up with actual values now. And it had nothing to do with the fact that we called it players here and we also called it players down here. That had nothing to do with the reason. We just happened to call it by a variable name that made sense. If we had named it LOL here, it would have had the exact same output as long as we changed all of the players to LOL in here. All right. So we get our players. Next thing we do, we call process option, passing our players. So again, process option is likely assuming the code is written correctly, is a static method, which makes it a class method. How do we know that? We know that because we're calling this method using the name of the class. Okay? This guy is taking in a single parameter of type player array. So when we go down to that method, we would expect that method to be a static method named process option that takes a single player array as a parameter. All right. Furthermore, what would you expect the return type of that method to be? And this guy, this question you can only answer with a probably. Because technically, you are not required to use the value that's returned by a method. You don't have to use it. But as we're calling it here, are we storing the return value anywhere? We're not. So that probably leads us to believe that there is not a return value. Does that kind of make sense? Chances are, if we're not using it, there probably isn't one. All right, let's just make sure we have our good stopping point, and I'll tell somebody to remind me what the stopping point was. Process options. Okay. So somebody remind me, well, here, we'll just introduce an error into our code. So this guy's not going to build unless we look at that code there. All right, so we'll pick up here next time. No homework assignment. Go back and review your exam, find out what you sucked at, get better at that. You will have a homework assignment, though, over the weekend. All right, I will see everybody on, what day is today? I'll see everybody on Thursday.